So what happens when, the highest civilian honor and the American dream itself?
Yeah.
What happens when they become collateral damage? In a political war, really, for the soul of the nation.
Yeah, that tension, that's exactly what we're digging into today in our deep dive. We've pulled together sources looking at three really powerful figures,
Right.
Ben Carson, Rush Limbaugh, and Pat Buchanan. And these weren't just advocates, right? They actually, you could argue, engineered the identity.
Engineered it, yeah.
The rhetoric, the whole popular appeal of modern conservatism.
Okay, so our mission today is basically to unpack that blueprint. How did their ideas move from maybe the fringes into the mainstream?
Precisely. And we've got an immediate news hook. Dr. Ben Carson, the renowned neurosurgeon, former HUD secretary, he was just announced as getting the Presidential Medal of Freedom.
And that award, right away, it just throws the political stakes into sharp relief.
Absolutely. Dr. Carson's life story itself, I mean, rising from what sources call dire poverty in Detroit, then Yale, then pioneering the separation of conjoined twins. It's held up as, the ultimate American dream narrative.
An achievement like that, getting the highest civilian honor, you'd think it would be something everyone could acknowledge, right?
Big thing.
But the sources really show that this award, just like his political career, it's become deeply contentious.
Yeah. And he's forceful on this point about education, too. Says it's being dumbed down.
Right? He even tells people, go look at a 6th grade exit exam from 150 years ago.
Yeah.
Just to see the difference.
Which is a striking comparison. But the reaction against him is, well, intense. Back in Detroit, where he grew up, a school board actually voted to take his name off a high school. One critic said having his name was like having Trump's name on our school in blackface.
Wow. And here's the contrast that just jumps out, and it really makes you question the priorities involved.
What's that?
That decision, removing his name, it happened while the Detroit Public Schools Community District is facing, you have to call it an educational crisis.
The numbers are bad?
Yeah, the sources state only 16% of middle schoolers tested proficient in reading. 16. And just 13% in math.
13%. So when politics seems to overshadow that kind of educational failure.
Exactly. It brings up the core question. What are the principles driving this modern conservative identity? And how did they get so central?
To really get the current moment, we have to look back at these architects who paved the way.
Okay, so let's start there. If the movement needed, say, an intellectual framework, some early warnings on policy, where did that thinking start?
Well, that leads us straight to Pat Buchanan, often called the ideological forefather of today's Republican platform.
The early watchman.
That's the phrase used, yeah. The America First movement's early watchman. Sounding the alarm, they say, long before others could see the storm.
And what was he warning about specifically?
He really laid the groundwork, focused on issues that are now absolutely central, clear-eyed warnings, the sources say, about porous borders, deindustrialization, foreign entanglements, and the decline of traditional values, that whole package.
So he was focused on the American worker, national sovereignty, things that really resonate now.
Definitely. And the sources point out, even without holding high office himself, his influence was huge. He championed ideas that were, maybe considered taboo by the establishment back then, and forced them into the national conversation.
Okay, so Buchanan sets the ideological stage.
Yeah.
But what about the delivery, the voice?
Well, if Buchanan provided the map, Rush Limbaugh was the rhetorical pioneer.
Okay.
Sources call him arguably the most important conservative messenger of the past 40 years. Why? Because he completely changed the image and the delivery of conservatism.
How so? What was the shift?
He changed the whole aesthetic. The sources talk about moving away from that kind of intellectual establishment figure, the proper man with a bow tie discussing theory.
Got it.
Instead, Limbaugh brought this style full of humor and a tone suited for a more rural and working class aesthetic. Much more direct, more entertaining for many.
And that change in style had real political consequences.
Well, massive. Our sources flat out assert, without Rush Limbaugh, there might not have been a populist movement or a Donald Trump presidency.
Wow.
He's credited with really fostering the ire of the disenfranchised, creating a media space that spoke directly to people who felt ignored by the mainstream.
And his supporters, how did they see him?
As a patriot, basically, fighting what they termed the Orwellian left-wing media machine. For years, for many listeners, he was the only consistent alternative voice to what they saw as a very liberal lean in national news.
So it was a fundamental shift then. taking the message out of, say, academic circles.
Exactly, and putting it straight into people's cars, their homes, built a really loyal, engaged audience that was primed for what came next.
Which brings us back around to Dr. Ben Carson, who, in this framework, seems to serve as the living symbol, the model of conservative meritocracy.
The proof of the American dream, yeah. That narrative is powerful. From poverty in Detroit to Yale, youngest major division director at Johns Hopkins at just 33.
And those incredible surgical achievements.
Absolutely foundational to his reputation. But his political work now seems rooted in this belief that the country's future hinges on the next generation understanding certain values and history.
Which explains his intense focus on education standards.
Right. When he says, we have dumbed things down so much, he means it. And that challenge about the 150-year-old sixth grade exam, it really underscores his view that expectations have just cratered.
So what's he doing about it, actively?
Well, he founded the American Cornerstone Institute, ACI, and it promotes 4 core principles he sees as vital for the nation: faith, liberty, community, and life.
Faith, liberty, community, life.
Okay. And how does ACI try to instill those?
Through education, specifically the Little Patriots Learning Program. It's a free curriculum aimed at young kids, teaching American history and values explicitly through a conservative lens.
Interesting. Starting young.
Very much so. And to really stress the importance of this early teaching, Carson actually quotes Vladimir Lenin.
Lenin. Yeah, it's surprising, but he uses Lenin's quote about controlling children's education. Give me your children to teach for 4 years, and the seed that I sow will never be uprooted.
So he's using that to say early ideological teaching, whether it's his preferred version or another, is absolutely crucial.
That seems to be the argument, yes, that the stakes are incredibly high in early education.
And how does this curriculum handle, say, the difficult parts of American history?
Well, Carson says ACI teaches the good, the bad, and the ugly. But he stresses there's a lot more good than there is bad and ugly. That's his perspective.
Okay. What about something specific, like slavery?
He acknowledges it was horrible, of course, but argues the U.S. is unique because, quote, we fought a bloody civil war and lost a large portion of our population to rid ourselves of it. He contrasts that sacrifice with how other societies have dealt with slavery throughout history.
Which brings us back to that political backlash he faces now.
It does. You see the stark contrast between his philosophy of teaching these specific values and that Detroit school board's decision to cancel him, essentially.
Yeah, where political alignment seems to just trump everything else, even those really concerning student achievement numbers.
And it's not just symbolic politics for Carson, according to the sources. They point to his work as HUD's secretary, focusing on tangible economic help for underserved areas.
Like the Opportunity Zone Initiative.
Exactly. What did that actually do?
Well, Opportunity Zones use tax incentives to try and drive private investment into economically distressed communities. The idea was practical economic uplift rather than just symbolic gestures.
And did it work? Any measurable impact?
The sources report it raised about $75 billion in capital for those communities in just the first 2 years. $75 billion. Wow.
Yeah, and the estimate was that it helped lift potentially 1 million Americans out of poverty. So a focus on measurable economic outcomes.
Okay, so this all leads us to the Presidential Medal of Freedom itself, the honor he's said to get. It feels like that has become politicized too.
Oh, absolutely. It's presented as a civic treasure, but sources say it's often used now to reward partisan fighters.
Right. Carson actually got one before, didn't he? For his medical work.
He did, yeah. Back in 2008 from George W. Bush. Now he's set to get another from Donald Trump. And Rush Limbaugh also got the medal from Trump.
I remember that. During the State of the Union address.
Right, which many supporters saw as a deliberate power move, making, as one source put it, a room full of captive libs watch their political opponent get this high honor.
So what's the justification? When these awards become so partisan, how do supporters defend it?
Well, the argument you often hear is basically the other side started it, or that the honor was, quote, already cheapened.
How so?
Supporters of Limbaugh, for instance, pointed to previous administrations, like Obama's, giving the medal to people like Robert De Niro. De Niro being a very outspoken Hollywood figure, highly critical of Trump around that time. So the argument becomes, if he can get it for cultural impact, despite being political, then Limbaugh, with his huge political and cultural influence, deserves it just as much.
Sort of a, if it's already political, reward our guys too argument.
That's the gist of it, yeah. If the standard is influence, not just nonpartisan achievement, then figures on both sides qualify based on their impact.
And it's not just about media figures or actors, right?
Right.
There was controversy around donors, too.
Correct. The sources mention Miriam Adelson, wife of a major Republican donor, Sheldon Adelson. When she received the medal, critics immediately called it corrupt and transactional.
So the perception is growing on both sides, really, that the medal isn't always about pure merit anymore. It's become another tool in the political toolkit.
It seems that way, yes. Once universally revered, now often viewed as a reward for friends or political allies.
Okay, so let's tie this all together. We have Buchanan laying the ideological foundation, Limbaugh crafting the populist message and style, and Carson as this embodiment of meritocracy and traditional values.
Right. They didn't just tweak policy, they really forged a new identity for a large part of the conservative movement and reinforced this core belief that the solutions to today's problems lie in America's foundational principles: faith, liberty, community, and crucially, a certain kind of education.
So connecting back to Dr. Carson's intense focus on education and his use of that really potent Lenin quote.
Yeah, the seed that I sow will never be uprooted.
It makes the stakes incredibly clear. So the final thought for you, our listener, is this. If the battle for the future really is won or lost in the classroom, as Carson implies, are we paying close enough attention to who is writing the curriculum? Who is defining those foundational American values for the next generation?